For quite some time, we'd been dreaming of a grand family road trip through Argentine Patagonia. Flying simply doesn't allow you to get to know the country as intimately as traveling by car. In this series of short films, I'll be sharing every inspiring moment of our truly remarkable journey. Starting from Buenos Aires, we followed the Atlantic coast all the way to the southern part of Santa Cruz province, then turned northwest into the Andes. The most distant point of our route was the village of El Chaltén. Over the course of 15 days, we covered 7,000 kilometers. Our journey began on an early September morning. In Argentina's upside-down seasons, mid-September is actually the end of winter. This is probably the best time to travel through most of the country's different climate zones.
Hello, Sasha.
The southern outskirts of Buenos Aires are not very scenic. We were eager to escape the concrete jungle as quickly as possible and enjoy the bright open spaces. Beyond the big cities, Argentina feels like a completely different country, one full of space, freedom, air and light. The further south you go, the more the province of Buenos Aires reminds you of Italy or Spain. On both sides of the road, farmlands and pastures stretch on for hundreds of kilometers. Argentina really is an agricultural country. Along the main highways you often see farmers selling local produce, most commonly berries, honey, olive oil, cheeses and cured sausages. They usually taste better than what you find in supermarkets. However, keep your wits about you. If they spot you are a foreigner, sometimes they might charge a very high price. We used 3 navigation apps at once, our car's built-in system, Google Maps and Waze. It turned out we couldn't fully trust any of them, especially when we lost the mobile internet connection. Following the Waze direction of the sat-nav, we made a useless wide loop across the center of the province, losing a good hour and a half. Also away from the national highways, petrol stations are very scarce. On our very first day we arrived at filling stations with only a few drops of fuel left after switching off their aircon and slowing down to save petrol. After that I made it a rule to start looking for a station as soon as the tank was half empty. Roads in Argentina are quite good, sometimes even perfect, so they can be a bit narrow. Of course, you'll find a few rough scratches and bad dirt roads, but you can reach almost any landmark or town in a normal sedan. Almost. When we wanted to admire the La Escondida waterfall, we discovered that just about a kilometer away the marked road calmly disappeared into a small river. In the end, we had to make do with viewing some swamp rapids and their many faceted inhabitants. Shortly before sunset, we arrived at the Naval Aviation Museum on the outskirts of Bahía Blanca, located on the Comandante Espora military base. Access was completely open, they didn't even check our IDs. The museum is relatively young. It opened its door in 1996. We had less than half an hour to look around the indoor exhibits before closing time. These displays mainly show documents, photographs and models that illustrate the history of the national naval aviation. Aviación Naval Argentina was created back in 1916, but its not-so-glorious debut came much later, in 1955, when naval aircraft bombed and strafed their own capital during a military coup attempt against President Juan Perón. The most interesting part of the museum is the outdoor exhibit area, which visitors can access at any time. The largest combat involvement took place during the undeclared Falkland War in 1982, known in Argentina as the Malvinas War. Also, the Air Force carried most of the burden in the air. Navy pilots showed quite impressive results despite having very limited resources. There they will find combat and transport planes and helicopters, including some used by Argentine forces in the Falkland War. Among them, the same Lockheed Neptune maritime patrol planes that detected and guided the attack on the mentioned British destroyer Sheffield. The attack by a Super-Intendant flight bomber on the British destroyer Sheffield was not only the first time since World War II that a large modern warship was sunk by an airstrike, but it's also first the British Navy to change its tactics, reducing its effectiveness. The Navy pilots also carried out reconnaissance, brought supplies to the Argentine troops on the Falklands, and evacuated the crews of downed aircraft. Next to the plane there is a full-scale replica of an aircraft carrier flight deck. Yes, at different times the Argentine Navy operated two such ships, so they never truly proved their worth. The carrier 25 de Mayo, which by the way was of British origin, was initially planned for use in the Falkland War, but its group ended up operating only from mainland airfields due to technical problems and the threat of British submarines. In my opinion, this museum is definitely worth a visit for any history lovers passing through Bahía Blanca. I didn't take any photos of our first apartment in the city. I wanted to spare my children, and to be honest, I just didn't feel like it. The only good thing about that place wasn't the ground parking. If they cleaned the apartment properly, it could be a decent option. I learned my lesson for the future. In Argentina, always choose accommodation with a cleanliness rating of at least 9 out of 10, because Argentine travelers tend to be very forgiving in the reviews. However, on the way back we stayed in a lovely, well-kept apartment in a new building with fresh renovation, solid furnishing and a very pleasant view of the city. The feature was a spot in a covered car park a couple of blocks away. Frankly speaking, Bahía Blanca is not the kind of city where I would risk leaving my car on the street overnight. And so, the next morning we headed for the Valdez Peninsula. To be continued. Give a like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll keep exploring Patagonia together.